What's up, guys? Welcome back to my videos series about URL versioning. Before we get started, just for all non-professional watching this video, there is a difference between a link and a URL. A link is a term used in HTML or any markup language, whereas a URL is a canonical term used for identifying any file in the remote system or a remote server. With that, let's get into query parameter versioning. In the last video, we demonstrate the difference between the class URL path versioning and namespace versioning. If you have not yet watched the video, make sure you click on the link above to watch the demo about namespace versioning and URL path versioning. As far as query parameter versioning, there is no special URL configuration on Django URL config module, as the class, which is query parameter versioning, expects from the user a query parameter defined within the class. As we can see in this request, the URL has a query parameter version equals 0.1, which should be a valid version from our allowed version property inside the class query parameter versioning. Again, no special configuration unless you truly want to specify a namespace for this URL configuration, but there is no special configuration as far as configuring the URL if you want to set your URL to have a query parameter URL. So let's demonstrate how we can version a URL with query parameter class. I'll see you in the demo. Okay, so we have our main configuration, URL configuration, insurance/URLs.py. We want to configure a new URL config which uses the query parameter URL. By query parameter URL, we mean for any given URL to be valid, the user has to issue a request which should have the following formats: path/query version equal a valid version, v1 or v2. To do so, we need to configure our class query parameter versioning. To configure the query parameter versioning, let's use another application. We have a new app called Premium. Premium has 3 attributes: price, payment cycle, and a related policy. We need to configure a URL for this application or this model. As you can see in our application folder, we do not have a file name URL.py, which means we need to create our configuration module, as Django call it. Let's create one quickly. New URLs.py. We can start tracking it by clicking add git status. So premium URL is added, tracked. First, we need to define the famous URL patterns, which is a list, and from Django config we can import from Django config URL we can import URL, and we have our URL. We can run our URL. The first thing we need to pass is the name of the URL. We can call it premium. The second argument we need to pass is the handler or the name of the view. Let's call it premium view. And the third one is the name of the URL. We can name our URL premium. That's all we need for our URL. Of course, premium view is not defined, which means we need to define premium view model class premium view, which should extend from Rest Framework view. We're just gonna use API view. Of course, what should I use? A grandparents if there is a young man out there. So let's use the view set, import mother view set. Mother view set is a grandchild of API view. So we have the view. This is the way Django has evolved as far as the view class. We have the view, we have the API view, we have generics, generic that contain view sets, and in the view sets we have list view sets. We have the list view and list view. We have the create, update view, and so forth. And lastly, we have the ground chart, the famous ground chart model view set. So model view set is automatically inherits all properties from its successor, if not its ground parents and parents. So but it has also it has also created its own property such as lists, updates, and some mixing like creates, update, mixing. So that's pretty much the way Django has evolved as far as the view. So why not use the youngest in the society model view set instead of using the API view? So but if you want something pretty simple, you probably need to choose the API view, but I wouldn't recommend somebody to use API view unless they are pretty new in Django. So always use model view sets, whether you want to use a simple gates or a simple verb view such as a simple gates or a simple past. Use model view sets because it extends all the property from its grand. Okay, that was just in brackets. We'll be using model view sets, and model view sets can get a query set. Since we don't need a query set for this demo, we just need to get. We will implement list, and list will print before list return a response, which we should import from Rest Framework response. Import response. Before it return a response, it should print the query parameter from our request, which is request query params dot get version. And of course we are using the view set contextual versioning, which means we need a property version class which will implement query parameter versioning. To do so, we can import from Rest Framework dot versioning, import query parameter versioning. We can directly pass the query parameter versioning. That's all we need for our view, except we need to make sure we retain a response for this view. We can response a JSON response with we can pass the key request version, which is request query param gets version. That's our premium view that will handle the view sets. Yeah, it's always recommend to use view sets at the end so we can make sure we're using the view sets classes module. So we have our premium view set. We go back on URL. We need to import premium view set from this package. On view, import premium view sets. We have our premium view sets. Now we need to test class premium test case, import test case. On setup, we have our URL name premium v1 equal. We need to reverse because we want to make sure that the request will have a valid URL, so we need to test this URL. Therefore, we need to import our Django. From Django shortcuts, import the reverse function. We want to reverse the name premium. Okay, and we can test premium URL. Just a simple print, just a simple debugging print. Or we can also assert that. But before we assert, we need to issue a request, which means we need to use the client get self premium v1, and when we get, we're expecting the response. We want to assert equal the response JSON on key. Let's look at the view on key requested version to have something like a premium, to be equal, should have said premium slash premiums slash version equal, let's say 01. So yeah, so we want to accept that's the response coming from the gates on this URL. The reverse premium will return a JSON object containing a key name request version, which has a value of this valid URL. So let's go ahead and test that and see what's gonna happen. Python test premium. What's going on? Where are we now? Of course, Python managed by test premium. This will throw an error. Okay guys, I think my settings fails because I'm pointing my database on one of my instance. Let's see. So I'm pointing on 192.168.1.174, which means I have to make sure that this server is running. Let me start the instance and I'll be right back. Okay, we have now granted permission to this user to create a test database. Now we can go ahead and test, see what's going on. So you can now reverse premium now found, which means we do have, even if we have a premium as a URL here, we cannot find any URL in our main URL configuration name premium. So we need to import premium. We can just import premium with creating a new URL configuration premium. Of course, we need to include the configuration, include premium URL. So we want something like a premium / premiums version equal 0.1. Let's see, that's not the test. We try it. So this should be premiums. Okay, what is our test? There we go. No, that's customer policy premium. Yeah, there we are. Also, premium now found is not a valid view function or pattern. We have to make sure that we customize our default query parameter, because this default query parameter versioning doesn't have a set of allow versions. So as we did with URL path versioning, we need to create a customized class. So let's create a new folder on premium. Just gonna name it versioning. Okay, we want it to be a package, so we can just go back, create a new new package, which automatically creates the init.py for us. Versioning yes and init. Now let's create our class name premium query param versioning. We have the class premium query param versioning, which extend from Rest Framework versioning imports query parameter versioning. So versioning is correct. So we need our tree property default version, which should be 0.1. Allow version, which should be a set or a list of 0.1, 0.2, or we can literally use floats 0.1, 0.2, 0.1. The version parameter we're expecting should be version. That's what we need. Now we need to import, instead of using the default query parameter versioning, we're going to import the customized Rest framework. That's from versioning imports premium versioning. So now we have a customized query parameter versioning. We need to name it query parameter. Query param makes sense. From premium versioning, premium query parameter. We gotta change the name of the file here. Refactor, rename, query, do refactor. Yeah. Let's continue testing. Now found. So premium now found. So it looks like we're looking for premium here. Now we got premium. So we need to make sure that it's premium. We got premium. What's next? So init takes one position, argument by two were given, which means we just need to run our single view and URL. We need to run the handler as view and get, which means get version to be ended by list. Okay, our test is passing. Let's see. Not yet, because we are not testing anything. We just need to make sure we test the response here. Bear in mind, we need to pass the query parameter in the URL, because this query parameter will not be generated automatically by Django. We need to literally pass it, so we can specify from this URL we need the version 0.1. Let's try to debug our response content. So we got invalid version in query parameter. What's going on here? We pass the v1, the default version 0.1, but why is it throwing an error invalid version query parameter? It means although we are using a little floating type here, Django will only recognize string. It does recognize string of version, so we need to make sure that these values are string. We have a string of we have 0.1, 0.2. Let's test again. So we got something here from the response, but we want to make sure that in our test that we want to assert that the response JSON on key request version on key request version returns something like a premium slash version equal 01. Let's try again. So the partial is not subscriptable, so this JSON is a function. It's now, or a sequence. It's not subscriptable, so it's now a sequence. So our test failed. We get a response instead of premium. So which means the handler is now responding what we want. In get requests, we want to get the path, the full path of the request. We can get full path. Yeah, it's passing. And then that's the default version. If we want to get the version 2, we can 0.2, we can just pass 0.2 and expect 0.2. We can also do something like this: query params URL equal cut paste query param URL and query param URL. So we're expecting the request version to be equal to the query param URL that we issue. The self premium v1 will automatically, we can just, since we're using v0.2, so the self premium v2 will automatically generate something like a premium dot premium, which is our valid URL from the main config URL, and then we add a query parameter with 0.2. Test. There we go. So that's the way we can build a URL with query, the URL versioning with query parameter. So we simply just making sure that we receive the version we pass from the query parameter, and we also, the request full path is equal to the request to the URL that we built on the testing, which gets our test pass. To see the URL literally, we can just print response JSON requested version. There we go. That's our valid URL for this particular view. So this premium view, premium view will make sure that the versioning class query parameter is applied before any URL to be valid. That's all for query parameter versioning. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.